He waited at the table for 3 hours, until she finally whispered, "I'm sorry." The restaurant lights shimmered softly across the polished marble floors, catching the reflection of the rain that trickled down the tall glass windows. At a corner table by the window, a man sat alone. His suit was slightly creased, his coffee long gone cold. The waiter had approached twice, offering to clear the untouched dessert in front of him, but he had politely declined each time. He kept glancing at his watch, then at the door, and then back at the chair across from him, the one that remained painfully empty. Every passing minute felt heavier than the last. His eyes told a story of quiet hope, slowly sinking into disbelief. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Because sometimes it takes just one act of understanding to change someone's entire life. The man's name was Ethan Cole, a 36-year-old architect living in Seattle. He was the kind of man who carried both discipline and softness in his demeanor. A hard-working single man whose quiet heart still carried the echo of love that had once felt like forever. 3 years ago, that love had been named Lila. They had met by chance at a construction site of all places when she, a spirited interior designer, had spilled coffee all over his blueprints on her first day. They had laughed then, that kind of laughter that feels like it was waiting for years to happen. Soon, their friendship turned into love. They built dreams together, late-night sketches, whispered promises, shared goals. But like many stories that start beautifully, theirs had cracked under the weight of time and misunderstanding. It wasn't betrayal or tragedy that tore them apart. It was silence, the kind that grows between two people when words are replaced by assumptions, when pride builds walls higher than forgiveness. Lila had wanted Ethan to be more present. Ethan had thought working hard was how he was showing love. They drifted apart quietly, like a candle losing its flame. Not suddenly, but slowly, painfully. The night she walked away, neither of them shouted. She simply said she couldn't feel him anymore, and he simply didn't stop her. But 3 weeks ago, a message had changed everything. "Ethan, I know it's been a long time. Can we talk?" He stared at that message for hours before typing a single word. "When?" And she had replied, "Friday 6 p.m. at Brio's. Same table." That was why he sat there now, watching the rain pour down like the sky itself was tired of waiting. He checked his phone again. 8:43 p.m. She was over 2 hours late. He could have left, but something inside him, some quiet, stubborn part of his heart, refused to move. He ordered another coffee, not because he wanted it, but because it gave him a reason to stay. Around him, the restaurant shifted through its rhythm. Couples came, laughed, left. The waiters changed shifts. The candles on tables melted lower. Ethan sat there still, his posture calm, but his eyes restless. Every time the door opened, he looked up, his chest tightening, only to feel it loosen again when it wasn't her. He remembered the way she used to hold her pen when designing, a little too tightly, the way she'd talk to her reflection in the mirror before an important meeting, the way she'd whisper, "Don't overthink, Ethan," when he stayed up late working on sketches. He remembered the small things, and that's what hurt most. The small things always do. When the clock hit 9 o'clock, the waiter approached gently and asked if he'd like to close the bill. Ethan nodded, forcing a smile that almost broke him. He reached for his wallet when suddenly a familiar voice spoke softly behind him. "Don't." "It's on me," he froze. Slowly he turned around. And there she was. Lila stood a few steps away, drenched from the rain, her hair clinging to her face, her coat soaked. Her eyes were swollen, maybe from tears or from the cold. He couldn't tell. She looked both exactly the same and completely different, like someone who had lived through storms and survived them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her voice trembled, barely audible over the faint music. "I should have been here hours ago." Ethan didn't speak. He just looked at her, letting the silence stretch until she sat down across from him. He could see her hands trembling as she tried to untie her coat belt, and he noticed she wasn't wearing her usual rings. The space where one used to be, a thin silver band, was empty. I almost didn't come, she said quietly, her eyes on the table. I was scared you wouldn't want to see me. Then my car broke down halfway here, and I thought maybe it was a sign. But then I thought, no, not this time. I can't run again. Ethan's throat tightened. 3 years of distance collapsed in that moment. He wanted to say 1,000 things, how he missed her, how he still kept the small sketch she made of their dream house, how he never found someone who understood the silence between words the way she did. But all he said was, I waited. Her eyes filled instantly. I know. You always did for a moment. Neither of them moved. The air between them was heavy but tender, like two broken pieces trying to see if they still fit. Lila finally looked up. Ethan, I didn't reach out because I wanted to fix everything. I reached out because I finally understood what I ruined. I wanted someone who'd make me feel less lonely, but you were the one who tried to make me feel safe. I didn't see it then. He smiled faintly, though his eyes glistened. And I thought working harder meant loving better. I didn't realize you were asking me to just be there. The conversation that followed wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, real, filled with long pauses and hesitant smiles. They talked about lost years, about regrets, about the dreams that never happened. They both admitted they had tried to move on but couldn't fully. They were both wounded, but somehow still gentle toward each other. By the time they stepped outside, the rain had softened into a mist. The city glowed faintly, the streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. Ethan offered her his jacket, and when she hesitated, he said softly, You're still shaking. She took it. They walked side by side in silence, neither of them sure what this moment meant, closure or a new beginning. But when they reached the parking lot and she turned to leave, Ethan said quietly, Do you still draw? Lila looked at him, a small, fragile smile breaking across her lips. Only when I miss you. That night, Ethan lay awake for hours replaying every word, every glance. He didn't know if this meant they would find their way back, but for the first time in years, his heart felt lighter. Sometimes love doesn't need to rush back. It just needs to return with honesty. A week later, Ethan found a small envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a sketch of that same restaurant table. 2 cups, 2 chairs, 1 caption, Thank you for waiting. There was no note, no number, no request, just that drawing. But it was enough to tell him everything he needed to know. She hadn't said goodbye. Not this time. Days passed. Then one evening, while Ethan was working late, his phone buzzed. A message. Same table. Friday, 6 p.m. He stared at it for a long time. Then he smiled. Not the kind of smile that hides pain, but the kind that holds hope. He closed his laptop, looked at the clock, and whispered to himself, I'll be there. When Friday arrived, the sun shone brightly through the restaurant's glass windows. Ethan sat at the same table, but this time his posture wasn't tense. He didn't keep checking the door. He simply waited, with peace. And when the door finally opened, he looked up to see Lila walking in, her smile trembling, but real. She sat down and took his hand without saying a word. They didn't need to apologize anymore. The past had already spoken. What mattered now was the quiet promise in their joined hands. The promise to not let silence win again. Sometimes love doesn't return in grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it comes back quietly, soaked in rain, whispering, I'm sorry, but meaning I never stopped caring. And those are the moments that make waiting worth every hour. If this story touched your heart, please don't leave without liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Because someone out there might still be waiting at their own table, believing love can return. Before you go, tell us in the comments, have you ever waited for someone you still believed in? What would you say to them if they finally came back?